All right. I'm going to talk about Samson today, Shimshon Hagibor. Um, as I said before, I think he may be the most difficult to understand of all the Torah characters. And I'm going to tell you why. But first of all, I'd like to make a little bit, we tell it as a children's story. We don't tell it as for adults. But I would like to tell you a little bit about what would happen, maybe, if this biblical superhero, Shimshon Hagibor, Samson the Great, what if it happened today? How would today's press cover it? And then we'll talk about Samson. So we're going to go a little bit deep today because I don't know how many people really understand this book. I think it's a children's story, and it's not at all. So here would be the headline if we had the Living Sea Scrolls of Qumran, 1100 BCE edition. Biblical superhero punished for steroid abuse. Noted superhero and judge of the Jews, Mr. Shimshon Hagibor, has been subpoenaed to testify before a special panel investigating steroid use among athletes, entertainers, and superheroes who are featured in the Tanakh, in the Jewish Bible. Attorneys for this biblical icon, who is best known for his long hair, bulging Popeye muscles, and creativity with weapons, say they have encouraged their client to cooperate with the special panel. However, they sent a warning to them that harsh questioning might trigger Mr. Hagibor's legendary explosive temper caused by roid rage. To no one's surprise, Shimshon Hagibor has repeatedly denied using illegal substances, attributing his overdeveloped physique to a parenting accident involving purposeful overexposure to an ultra-strong strain of Nazir bacteria. Sources familiar with this case report that Mr. Hagibor's personal trainer will testify that he personally injected the defendant on more than one occasion with a mutant growth hormone called PGH, which has become known as pituitary growth hormone. But at that time, it was called Pelishtim Geyavek hormone. Mr. Hagibor responded by saying, I can categorically state that I never knowingly took PGH, but cannot say with certitude that my personal trainer has not included some into my multivitamin shots without my knowledge or consent. Whoops, here we go. I'm sorry. The key got stuck again, so here we go. Anyway, without my knowledge or consent. At the conclusion of benching, at the conclusion of the grace after meals, after finishing his lunch, Rabbi Harvey Chenu, the chief rabbi of the Beit HaKisei, who is conducting the hearings, questioned Hagibor's credibility. The chief rabbi pointed out that Mr. Hagibor exhibits many of the classic signs of steroid abuse. This includes unusual skin elasticity and hair length, cartoon character-like bulging muscles like Popeye the Sailor Man, and volatile mood swings, often referred to as roid rage. Mr. Hagibor is admired as a role model by many children, and his failure to come clean sends the wrong message, said the chief rabbi to the reporter sent by the Living Sea Scrolls of Qumran. We don't want impressionable young Kinderlach thinking it's cool to go around slaying thousands with jawbones and bringing down entire houses of partygoers. The Beit HaKisei special panel is calling for a strict policy to end steroid abuse by biblical characters. Rabbis Hillel, Shammai, Akiva, and as well as Rashi, Rambam, and the Vilna Gaon of Tom's River, amazing and infamous great rabbi sage, could not be reached for comment, mostly because other than the amazing scholar of Tom's River, the rest of them are no longer alive. So ends the news article. But if we think about it, the story of Shimshon easily lends itself to such fantasy. It easily does, and we make it fantasy. How can anyone take that story seriously? Today's Haftorah introduces us in an unusual way to an unusual Jewish leader by telling us an unusual story. And it's true. Shimshon is a man who is over 7 feet tall. And in those days, if you were 5 feet, you were a giant. You know what I mean? It was, the people weren't, there wasn't basketball yet. They just didn't have that kind of tall people. 7 feet tall. And he possessed extraordinary strength. He is much more like the Greek god of Hercules than any other Jewish leader who ever lived, even to this day. He's described as a far-out character from what we expect of our Jewish leaders. Other than Shimshon, our Tanakh describes our leaders as being models of intellectual, moral, and spiritual excellence, as opposed to being a model for the cover of Hard Body magazine. So what about what happened before Shimshon was born? This is important. God had sent a messenger, as it said, and as Peretz Halevi read for us today. He sent a messenger to visit Shimshon's future mother, who couldn't have babies, and declared that Shimshon would be a Nazir for his entire life. That's what he told her. Shimshon was going to be a Nazir for his entire life. That's why she couldn't drink any wine or anything that comes from a grape. From now on, she couldn't do it. So he would be born a Nazir. Well, there's a problem with this, and it's really quite remarkable. The messenger's proclamation is completely out of the definition of a Nazir. It can't be. It doesn't work. It can't work. Why? To be a Nazir, a person must voluntarily make a vow. And the vow only lasts for a limited period of time, like 30 days or 6 weeks or 5 months or 6 months. Not a lifetime. It's limited in duration. The vow consists of the Nazir promising to abstain from 3 things. 1, the Nazir cannot come in contact with a dead body. 2, the Nazir must abstain from drinking wine or eating anything that comes from a grape. And 3, they cannot shave or take a haircut. Now again, it's a limited time. It's a limited period. It's not meant to last forever, and it can't last forever, and I'll tell you why later. But when it is time to be released from the vows, the Nazir goes to the Kohen with a sin offering and then can return to normal life. Why? To get forgiveness from the sins that he may have committed while being a Nazir. So the key here is that becoming a Nazir cannot be forced on anyone. I cannot appoint you to be a Nazir, nor can your mother, nor can your father, nor can an angel. Nobody can. Only you can do it. No one can be selected as a Nazir. It's purely 100% a voluntary thing. What about this guy? He didn't volunteer. He didn't even know. He was born this way. Also, the status does not last. And he said he was going to be for his whole life, the angel said. So this is a self-imposed state that is intended to help bring one's life back on track. This is when somebody was way off track in life, wanted to get back on track. They would swear into the notion of this Nazir. That's how it worked. And in the case of Shimshon, that was not a self-imposed vow. No, it wasn't. Was the time of the vow limited? No, it wasn't. He wasn't self-imposed and it wasn't self-limited. It was for his whole life and it was chosen for him. So two questions. How could Shimshon have been declared a Nazir without ever choosing to be one? How could that happen? How? And how did the messenger of God say it would last for Shimshon's entire life when that is not possible? All right, we got to answer these two questions now. I asked them, I got to answer them. But we have to look back and explain about who Shimshon is before we can understand the answer. First, Shimshon was a soldier. That's what he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be a soldier. He is a warrior. He was trained to always be prepared to kill without mercy when necessary. That's what he had to do. That was his mission in life. That was chosen for him by this angel, by God's choosing the angel to tell him this. A soldier is a warrior who in battle conditions doesn't have any time to think about the consequences of destroying others or causing them tremendous pain and suffering. When you're at war and you're holding a weapon and somebody is aiming at you, you don't have time to say to the person, maybe you should think about that. Maybe we should sit down and have a cup of tea. Maybe we got to have a drink of schnapps and talk. No, doesn't work that way. Everybody knows that. You have to be a warrior, and we have to sometimes act like an aggressive animal in order to achieve the mission and to avoid being killed ourselves. As has been proven so many times in every single war that ever was fought, even the best military strategy only goes so far. A famous general who I can't remember always said, you can have the best strategy in the world until the first bullet is shot. A soldier is a warrior who needs to have the killer instinct to make sure the strategy yields a successful outcome. And then on the other hand, the Torah teaches us to be different than that. As Jews, we must be different than that. We have to strive to use our intellect, our morals, and our ethics before we become animalistic. Today's Israeli Defense Forces personify this model. We do. It does, I should say. They fight as soldiers must, but they also show compassion. And you know that, and I know that. It is remarkable how humanely Israel treats even the most monstrous of terrorists who they capture. And that is what the Torah teaches. And those of us who have gone to Israel and have gone into the hospitals and have seen what they do there, next to in every Jewish hospital, in every hospital in Israel, there are people there who were terrorists, who were enemies of ours, who shot at us, and we treat them no differently, not 1 ounce differently than we treat the Jewish people, the Israelis themselves. And you know that, if you were there and you saw with your own eyes as I did. So during Shimshon's life and times, Israel had no control over its own destiny. If the people had acted the way today's Israel acts, guess what would have happened to them? They would surely have been annihilated. That is why Shimshon had to rely on his instincts. It was Shimshon's mission to be a warrior, not a moralist, not an appeaser. His future would have been the end of the Jewish people had he failed. So today, most of us learn to control our animal nature as we mature. But for Shimshon, for Samson, that could never have happened. Ironically, Shimshon enjoyed the success he did because he never considered the ideal to act as an impediment to his mission. He always acted out of necessity. And with that as background, now we can answer the two questions I asked. God placed Shimshon on this earth for an important reason, to carry out a most difficult, but a strategically important, I should say, a strategic imperative mission. If he didn't, there'd be no more Jews. We'd be dead. It would have been over. So to accomplish this, Shimshon could not live as a mensch. Why? A mensch would have never done what Shimshon did. Not in a million years. It's hard for us to imagine this. We always think of him as a great person. He wasn't. He couldn't have been. Shimshon needed a way to be able to atone for the sins that he would have committed while serving God. He did. He did such bad things. He had to be able to atone for his sins. Now he's in a mess. He's doing sins. He has no choice but to do sins. He's treating people extremely badly. He's killing people with a jawbone of an ox. And now he needs to atone for it. He can't. He's in a catch-22. It was the only way Shimshon could carry out his lifelong mission and still be at one with God. God, who had created a situation where the ends justified the means. Oh, he was in a no-win situation, this poor guy. The status of a Nazir is self-imposed for a limited time for a reason. The reason is so that after you become a Nazir and go back to a normal life, you can atone for your sins. You can atone for what you did wrong. Shimshon couldn't do that. He couldn't do that. Shimshon had no time to atone for what he did wrong. He was never given that option because he had to be a Nazir for his entire life. And God told him that. Oh, now, the status of being a lifelong Nazir would act as a counterbalance to the lifelong mission of war that Shimshon had been given. It was to allow Shimshon to live his entire life in a state of atonement with God for doing what he had to do. But he couldn't. He couldn't. Ideally, the end should never justify the means, never in a million years. We should never do that. But in this case, to prevent the total annihilation of the Jewish people, it did. Politicians do this. Everything they do is so they can get reelected and collect more money and do this and do that. Everything they do. That's a politician's life. Do they ever repent? Sometimes. But most of the time, they don't think they're doing anything wrong because to them, the ends justify the means. And that was the case here. To prevent the total annihilation of the Jewish people, the ends did justify the means for Shimshon. No choice. Unfortunately, even though Shimshon saved the Jewish people, he could never receive his reward as long as he was a Nazir. Now, Remember what happened to him? He got drunk because Delilah seduced him. He got drunk and he allowed his hair to be cut. He allowed Delilah to seduce him. He did. Now, my question to you is, was he violating the Nazir's oath when he did that? He got drunk. His hair was cut. He's not allowed to do that if he's a Nazir. He also did not bring a sin offering to the Kohen at the time. So, was his status as a Nazir still in place? After this incident, what did Shimshon do? And this is important. He regrew his hair and he voluntarily accepted his role as a Nazir. He knew he had done wrong and he chose to repent. He now became a Nazir. He never was before. He never took the oath. His mother did. You cannot appoint somebody to be a Nazir. He never was. He just followed God's mission. Now that is a twist. Most of us have been taught to refer to this judge as Shimshon HaGibor, Samson the Great, because of his tremendous physical strength and size. You know what? That's not why he was great. If there is one thing we should learn from this person's life, it is that nothing could be further from the truth. The reason he was called Shimshon HaGibor, Samson the Great, is because he had to live his entire life constantly fighting his internal demons that he ultimately learned to defeat along with the Philistine. He sacrificed most of his life's pleasures to devote himself to the success of God's mission. He never took an oath to do it, he just did it. And even though it was not his initial choice, he never chose it. It happened to him. He was forced into it. He didn't know anything other than that. And in the end, Shimshon HaGibor finally understood what he had to do to save his people Israel. And he stepped up and he volunteered on his own to become a Nazir and to destroy the Philistine. Maybe Shimshon lived his life much like the Greek god Hercules. Maybe he did. But he ended it as one of the greatest role models of our people Israel, period. May we all learn from Shimshon HaGibor and never live our lives based on a routine that someone else has imposed upon us. He wasn't a baby when he gave up this Nazir thing and took it on. He was already a man well on in his years. What about you and I? We're well on in our years, many of us. Why can't we take that choice? May we learn from Shimshon HaGibor that it is never too late to choose to do things for the right reason. May we learn from Shimshon HaGibor that it is never too late to choose to leave the world just a little bit better than the way we found it. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and an Am Yisroel Chai.